I request all to please rise for our CA motto song.
Yeshasupteshu jagrati Yeshasupteshu jagrati Kamam 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 Pursho nirmimanaha Adena shukram brahma Asmin lokaha shataha sarve taduna charye kasyana etadvaita
Please be seated. Before video will be played.
Arthashastram, Dharmashastram cha, meaning economic principles, Arth, and ethical considerations, Dharma, which are central to the work of accountants. The entire world is deliberating about impact of climate change coupled with disruptions of artificial intelligence. India has given philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam to the world and successfully hosted G20 summit on this theme and also launched Global Biofuels Alliance. The accounting profession also has an enormous responsibility to guide the work, where accountability meets innovation so that vision can be converted into solution. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, being the world's largest accounting body after the successful hosting of WCOA 2022 and GLOBAC, proudly presents before the World Forum of Accountants 2025. Where accountability meets innovation for a sustainable planet. The world's brightest minds will exchange insights, explore emerging trends, and unlock the possibilities for the profession, where foundation will be laid to shape the vision for the future of accounting profession. Hosted at Yashobhoomi, the largest convention and exhibition center in the heart of India's capital, New Delhi, inaugurated by the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, is all set to host the congregation of accountants from around the world. And while you're here, experience the vibrant culture and heritage of New Delhi, a city where history meets modernity, offering unforgettable memories.
World Forum of Accountants, an experience of 3 days, insightful discussion, groundbreaking innovations, and unparalleled networking opportunities.
With immense pride, we invite you to WOFA 2025, taking place, happening from January 31st to February 2nd, 2025 at the magnificent Yashobhoomi, New Delhi. Experience 3 days of insightful discussions, groundbreaking innovations, and unparalleled networking opportunities. World Forum of Accountants 2025 is where you need to be, where accountability meets innovation, AI for a sustainable planet. Join us at WOFA 2025 from January 31st to February 2nd, 2025 at Yashobhoomi, New Delhi. For more details, visit wofa.icai.org.
It's my pleasure to introduce Sathyabhama ma'am, is a chartered accountant and a certified information system auditor with over 2 decades of experience in internal audit, information system audit and consulting, process improvement, and design and testing of control under XOS Sarbanes-Oxley Act 2002. He also certified SAP professional, ISO 27001 implementer, and diploma in IFRS issued by the Association of Chartered Certified Accountant UK. He dealt with medium and large organization and MNC company. Thank you, ma'am, for your presence. I request Usha Nagarajan, ma'am, to present memo and shawl to our speaker. Hand over to a speaker.
Good evening, everyone. So, thanks for turning up for the CPE session, and thanks for ICII for inviting me for this talk here. When they asked me to talk about multidisciplinary partnership, so my very first thought at that time was, is it not something which is already there? So what is something new that we are going to discuss? So in terms of novelty, maybe there's not much which I can share probably to this forum, except I also realized, except for one thing, that there is a guideline which has been issued by the institute. So most of you may also be aware of that. So my thought process for this session was therefore first primarily take you through the guidelines, what they basically talk about, and probably what was the idea behind the whole thing when the guidelines was developed and published. And also I think it's basically multidisciplinary firm is a reality of today. So there's something that we can't do without. So I come from a firm where we have this multidisciplinary concept. So maybe we can share some practical experiences, and then I would like it to be more of a open discussion where we can sort of exchange ideas and challenges that we face. So maybe we can just start off with the presentation. But before that, one question is, I just wanted to ask from the audience, how many of you are focused largely on audit and related practices, with traditional audit and traditional financial practices till now, or how many of you have moved away from the traditional chartered accountant practice? Just a show of hand. So traditional practice, if you can just show a hand. Okay, so that's more or less 50%. Okay, so the others, I assume you're doing non-traditional practices, like, so if you can just share what are the non-traditional practices you're doing. Any of you who didn't show hands? Okay, fine. Okay, so basically from the audit or attest function, as the projection typically over the world is that audit or the attest function is actually a shrinking practice, is what has been predicted in the traditional sense, especially in the financial audit terms. But whether it will go away, it will not go away. That is known fact. But what are the challenges, especially in terms of new technologies and the new changes and landscape which we are facing? That is where this whole concept of multidisciplinary partnership comes in, because we have largely been trained to do traditional attest functions of the financial information, basically. So but increasingly, like with the introduction of IFC itself, we have seen that we've been asked to look at beyond just the numbers, and we've been asked to look at systems and processes which lead to these numbers. So this happened by the institute came up with the IFC guidelines way back in 2016 itself. So from there itself, so for the last 10 to 15 years itself, this change has been happening in our professional landscape, where we have been challenged constantly to look, I mean, if we have to make sense of the numbers, we should also have to make sense of what is going behind the numbers, right? So then the next question is, are we really competent enough to do that? Or two, more than competency, whether we would have the bandwidth to do that. So I think the concept of multidisciplinary partnership comes in that context. One is competency and the other is bandwidth, because you're already struggling with increasing regulatory requirements, changes in regulatory landscapes, a tightening of all the regulators, and they're all breathing down our necks. We're asked to improve a lot on our workings and bring in a lot of transparency. And then there is again the challenge from the clients increasingly, whether they are listed, non-listed or whatever, to do audit in a faster way, to do an audit in a more efficient way with decreasing deadlines. Typically, irrespective of how big or small the client is, they all want their financial audit and their tax audits with a crashing timeline. So earlier what we used to do in 3 months or 4 months, they are now asking us to do in 1.5 months. So the challenge now for us is to how do we meet these challenges with our existing setup itself. So that's why we need to bring in more professionals from diverse backgrounds probably. And I personally have experienced this. I do largely, I have moved out of financial audit, and I do largely internal audit, risk-based audits and systems audits. So whenever we go and talk to a client, engage with them on internal audits, especially some of the big conglomerates and big companies, hardcore manufacturing companies, some of them even come up with questions like, do you have any technical people who can give us some value add on process efficiency? So typically, in an internal audit, when we talk about, we largely again focus on the financial areas, the so-called financial areas, which has been identified in the IFC itself, right? So apart from this, they talk about two things. They ask about process efficiency. Like for example, typical example is repairs and maintenance area. So we look upon it as a financial area, right? But there have also been queries where they ask, do you have either in-house or have you associated with any engineers? I mean, I've personally come across this 1 or 2 clients who have asked me, do you have any in-house engineers, mechanical or chemical engineers who can give us some process improvement ideas so that the efficiency of this process can be improved? And then there has been a mandate in one of the clients where we've been asked to look at safety and security as part of internal audit. So, the initial reaction was safety and security. We normally, relegate to some basic things like fire safety and stuff. But they expect us to go a little more in detail. So, and to be very frank, this client was also ISO 14001 and 45001 certified, where they have environmental and HR and industrial practices, and your safety practices have also been certified by an international organization. So, but still, as an internal auditor, they wanted our view on whether these processes are in place, whether they are working effectively and all that as part of the safety audit. So that scoping itself was a challenge there on, see, I can't be too technical because I'm not very knowledgeable on the technical aspects, at the same time too mundane or procedural, operational. And you also have to look at certain other aspects, what would be the financial impact and all that. So, it is becoming increasingly challenging. And again, increasingly, whenever we go for some internal audit proposals, another related question is, do you have competency in doing forensic audits or, again, specific systems audits? So, two related areas. So, the next question is, forensic is again largely what we can do, right? But forensic is a very big area where one portion of it is financial fraud, which we can definitely have a look at. But especially technical frauds which happen required a very, so forensic audit is actually an area where you require a multidisciplinary team, you would require technical professionals, you would require financial professionals, you would require people from operations. who can do background check, people typically with a defense or security exposure, where they can come up with ideas and processes and how it went wrong. They can give us some insights on operationally what things went wrong, and typically it will also involve some background verification into the so-called suspects. Okay, so where you're asked to look into their financial background, their how things have been happening, their lifestyle. So you are engaging people totally divergent from our CA functionality here. And again, once all these things come through and we have been able to identify or at least give probably the the methodology which was happened to perpetrate this fraud, the next thing is, what do I do the next? So do you have any advocates, or do you have in-house advocates who can help us in navigating the legal framework inside this? So that itself is a big area. You just take forensic, it's a multidisciplinary, and if you take most of the forensic audit firm, they definitely have a tie-up with lawyers, and then like I told these background security professionals, and then they have the digital forensics experts. And then digital has become so big that you have to have digital labs and all that, where you can look into emails, look into your laptops, hard disk, server hard disk, map them, see for any data which is there, erased data. All those things are a big thing and little expensive also for each of our firm to be investing in as a chartered accountant, right? And we may also not have the bandwidth, because I'm more concerned with satisfying my current client, my current practice, and my current specialty. So that's where this has come in. And interestingly, ICAI has envisaged this quite some time back and issued a guideline where they said that how do you form MDP partnership, that is a multidisciplinary partnership. So I'll just take you through what the guidelines basically says, and then we can talk about the other challenges. So again, it's basically when they talk about the multidisciplinary, so when you talk about multidisciplinary partnership, they again talk about a CA firm only, registered with the Chartered Accountant Institute. Only thing which would be different in this case is we are onboarding certain other professionals also into our firm as partners. We also know that there are a lot of firms in currently itself who have been engaging with people from other professions. So that is nothing new basically, but what this guideline is talking about is where you take them in as a partner. And if you see, yeah, so this has been enabled basically by Regulation 53 of the Chartered Accountant Regulations Act. So that is what has enabled this entire thing. So our CA Act itself and the regulations relating to it has been changed to enable the multidisciplinary partnership. I think this we have already gone through the reasons for the same. So who can be the partners? What is it that the CA Institute has actually looked at whom we can onboard as partners? These are the people we can onboard other professionals. They're talking about company secretary, practicing company secretary, practicing cost accountant, then an advocate, engineers, architects, and actuaries. So if you see, most of the people we are already associating with at some level of the other, but most of them have independent practices. Now when the institute is talking about an MDP, it is talking about including any of these people as a partner, whole-time partner in our firm. Except for advocate, all the others have enabled this setup in their respective act, or their regulating bodies have enabled it in their guidelines or whatever. CA, though advocate, CA Institute has actually said that we can incorporate. It is practically not possible because the Bar Council has still yet to give their assent to that. They have not changed their guidelines accordingly. So that is not possible. So that is why an advocate can still not be onboarded as a partner. And even in actuary, there is a limitation. A full-time practicing actuary cannot be onboarded. Only if he has a not in practice or as a part-time practice only can be onboarded. So that is the and then we are talking about the procedures. If you see the guidelines, it talks about what to do. There are certain forms which have to be filled, which is form 117, where all the details are given. The primary thing is that you need to get the approval of the institute, all the concerned professional bodies. You have to declare everything in to ICAI as well as the related professional bodies and get the consent. The other thing is, once we do this, what are the challenges or the limitations maybe which will come into play? Mainly, okay, in terms of what are the services we can provide, basically virtually whatever services we are providing now continues, there are no limitations on that. But in terms of Companies Act, the major challenge is that the audits that only the practicing chartered accountants in the firm can take up the company audits. And in terms of eligibility criteria, when they are going to compute, obviously only the chartered accountant, the number of chartered accountants would be considered. Another limitation is, if by any chance that your, let's say there are 4 partners, the majority of them have to be chartered accountants. So you can have maybe 1 or 2 chartered accountants. In majority, you have to ensure that they remain chartered accountants so that you can get the benefits of empanelment in various forums and under the Act. So that's the only thing. And again, limitations with respect to the ceiling limits for Companies Act, for companies audits and all that, it will again be applied to the number of practicing chartered accountant partners. The only otherwise, in terms of administration, profits and all that, it is all left to the firm's discretion. There is no major responsibility or liability or restriction with respect to that. And then this is when you have to, what is the procedure when you have to reconstitute it as a MDP? Okay, so whenever you bring in a non-CA as a professional on board, then you have to fill this Form 18 within 30 days and all that. And the same thing in case of exit and all also. Otherwise, the procedures are more or less the same. It's just been, only other thing is whenever there is a branch office, again it mandates that CA is only the practicing chartered accountant should be the branch head. There are very few cases, and if you need an exception, you need to get the council's approval for that, written approval for that. And fees again as regulated by the CA Institute only. Disciplinary proceedings, this is the main thing why the MDP has not really taken off. Apart from, there is, each of the institute will then exercise their jurisdiction over the respective people we have taken on as a partner. So it becomes a little complicated in navigating the disciplinary proceeding rules. So the liability there becomes a little ambiguous on the firm. So I think that is one of the reasons why this concept of MDP has not really taken off in the way that the institute has envisaged. But anyway, otherwise, like we told you, there is, we discussed earlier, there are multidisciplinary firms is anyway de rigueur right now. The advantage is, there is a brand name. So most of the time we feel that when we go to a chartered account, a client, they ask for company secretarial services, accounting services, and then they ask for some tax related services. Most of them, and then sometimes they ask for cost records or cost evaluation. They ask whether the costing thing has been, whether we can review all that. So these are things again effectively we can do. But there are also cases where they come up and ask whether you can do the cost audit, which we cannot, because he has to be, the cost auditor has to be a registered practitioner under the Cost Accountants Act. So that we can't do. So the only thing is, ultimately, what is the purpose? The purpose is whether I can expand my business, I can expand my presence, so that I grow into a bigger firm rather than as a small firm, right? That is the whole purpose. The challenge is, of course, jurisdictional, and then with respect to too many bodies regulating me as a firm, which is not very convenient for us. And then there can be conflict of interest. So that is why, if you see the way we are currently operating, people typically like to hive off as a consultancy firm and put in all these people as either, depending upon the constitution, either as a partnership or LLP or a private company, and put these people as the in charges there, so that the consultancy work happens independent of the audit or a test function, and this becomes even more the transparency and the division is becoming even more challenging, especially because now NFRA and the others are now behind our back on that. And then everything else is only a question of internal arrangement that we have with the respective people in terms of work sharing and all that. So this is what effectively the guideline says. So this is what I have in the presentation basically. But in terms of challenges, what we face is right now what I have seen in most of the firms, that I have not come across a single MDP registered firm as the Act has envisaged here. Try to look at the ICAI records, so obviously the concept has not taken off totally. So what we are working, the challenges is that we still have to move a lot way into technology. That is something we are still lagging a lot behind. Like whether we want to do, we have to do forensics or continue in the attest function itself. We are not, it's very difficult to gain expertise in the areas of technology particularly. The options that we have available in terms of even attest functions is again, apart from what we have in the ICAI, one major area because of all the global outsourcing which is happening in the GCCs which have come up now, and also the BPO culture which started up in the early 90s itself, is that you have the SOC 1, SOC 2 attestation that we call, but of course that requires the CPE certification. But there are also cases where we can take up that job and do just a gap assessment based upon whatever is the AICPA guidelines, and if a certification is required, then we can go to the CPA. So we can always have a chartered accountant who is doing a CPA. So that's what is happening right now. So like I told you, I have nothing new which we have to talk about in terms of constitution, because we already have that. We have chartered accountants who are CPAs, we have chartered accountants who have done forensics, chartered accountants who are systems auditors, again chartered accountants who are AI specialists and who are data specialists and all that. Only thing that I would like to bring to fore is that there was sometimes, especially in a very highly technical area, we may face challenges because we are trying to straddle two professions at the time, trying to get updated on two professions at the time. So we may still have to onboard a very, very technical person. Like for example, if I have to do vulnerability assessment, it's always better that you onboard a technical person or a person who's a CA but who's no longer practicing CA, who's fully into the technology part, who can help us and do that work with the relevant experience and expertise. So that is one aspect there. Most of the firms, what we are doing is we're either associating ourselves with another person, another firm, a specialist firm like this, or some of them have onboarded them as a employee, so they are not partners. But again, the challenge, like typically in our firm, we don't have a CPA. So if you don't have a CPA, the next question comes is there's work which flows to us on the SOC 1, SOC 2, but if you don't have a signing CPA, obviously it's some other's letterhead and some other person who's issuing, so clients may not view it very favorably, and you may lose on opportunities. So the question is, we have to start expanding, and I think we are doing that to some extent, except that it has to be accelerated a little more. In terms of fees and other arrangement, I like to say this, that we have to look upon our profession increasingly as a multi-speciality hospital. So when you think of a hospital, anything, apart from the general ward and the general physicians and all that, you have specialists everywhere and they have their own specialist team. So sharing of resources is something which can never happen in a multi-disciplinary thing, because it's not just the partner who needs to have this knowledge and the skill level. Ultimately, the execution team, the ground level team is the one which needs to have this exposure. This means increased cost because there are certain areas where you cannot use article clerks at all. So that becomes our major limitations. So our major challenge, I feel, as a chartered accountant firm, when you're trying to expand into multiple areas, is basically the chicken and egg case. Now, do I wait for opportunities and then invest, or do I invest and then wait for opportunity? So that has become a classic scenario where we are finding it very difficult. So then we strike up this interim solution where I associate with some other person. But the major problem there is that I never internalize the expertise which is required. So on a long-term basis, if I need to internalize that, the only other option is I build a team internally on my own, or I onboard somebody, or we do this inorganic mergers and bring them in so that we have the necessary expertise and our firm grows on that level also. So sticking to traditional audit is going to be a shrinking revenue area, and the only way to keep ourselves and grow, existence and growth both is only possible in terms of value as well as value addition that we can bring to clients is through this multidisciplinary practice that we can establish. So this is purely out of experience. You have any questions, any thoughts that you can share, we can take that up. Sir, I'm not able to hear you.
Whether MDP is popular in Chennai, whether people are coming forward, firms are coming
No,
forward.
sir. Actually, overall, at an all-India level, I couldn't find any single firm registered under the so-called MDP. The other thing is there is an added level of thing, apart from the FRN number, you also have a separate MDP number and all that. So there is a small additional process which is there, but I think these are the limitations because of which it is not really taken up. But we have, as a practice, we have formulated our own alternate methods to grow and incorporate all these multidisciplinary practices. So, but in future, this is the only way. And personally, I feel that we will be able to bring in a lot of value add irrespective of the discipline, because sometimes, especially when we do these, except where it is highly technical and all that, if you see a lot of people who do systems audits or technology audits, especially when you are doing ITGC for IFC and all that, if you put in a pure technical person, the major disadvantage in putting a pure technical person is they look at only the systems. They really are not aware of what are the basic risks which are there in the data flow or in the process flow. Like for example, we are talking about two systems integrating with each other. Okay, a very technical person will only look at, let's say for an example, a person with an engineering background or a person who's done BSc or MSc computers or MCA whatever. So those people, or MTech or whatever, what they tend to look at is they just look at this application and then the interface, they see okay it is interfaced at what level and then they conclude. They don't really think in terms of the data. And we inherently keep thinking in terms of data, completeness, accuracy, validity. Completeness, accuracy, validity, we are the only ones who think about it. Because in my last 10 years, I've worked with enough technical professionals, and this is consistently an area which they miss. The risk factor is something they keep missing out, and we have to bring in the risk perspective to their audits. So in case of, that's where I think we largely play a role. Even in case of a very technical audit, I think what we can always do is understand the general environment, see what is the risk associated. I ask them whether you've checked this risk or not. See, unless in case of, for example, cyber crime, that is where something we may not be able to input a lot of things, but we can still, based on overall, news gathering, whatever we've seen, general information, we can ask, have you looked at this risk, whether it's applicable, not applicable, tell me why it is not applicable, why are you excluding this? Because VAPT is again a very funny thing, and the way the vulnerability assessment, especially using tools and all, is done, you actually choose what you need to test. And so scoping is a big area where a lot of judgment is involved, and we can always still question them whether they are technical or not. We can still question how have you scoped it, have you considered this risk is something we can do. Risk perspective is something technical guys don't have. And in fact, one person, one of the clients, when they were talking, especially in the data area, it's really exploded in the last 5 years. A lot of chartered accountant firms, we are still getting a lot of inquiries on whether you can build me dashboards. Because even though I may have sophisticated systems, some simple dashboards which give me, I come in the morning, I see what are all the total PO outstanding, or I want to see what are all the payment outstanding, or what are the high value deficiencies which have happened, whatever, some kind of a dashboard in almost every financial area, almost every financial controller requires. So to build those dashboards, we need to give the input, and the data scientists are only able to build the data structures around them. You leave it to them, there's a huge gap between the expectation and the needs which are met. So we may not know, for example, Power BI, we may not know any of the other data analytic tools, but we can always give an input on what needs to be done, what should be the output. We can always design the output and then check for whether this is meeting the expectations. Because that particular client specifically said, I want only a person. If you have a data analyst who's also a chartered accountant, we really welcome that. Because he said, otherwise I'm getting lost with the perspective and sunk a lot of money with no tangible returns. And I think that's going to happen in AI also. AI in the sense that as a user experience is something different, but from an entity or an organization experience, the kind of the perspective that you need, the depth of process understanding, the process or the data flow that you need, it typically comes from us, functional people, rather than from the technical guy. And again, too much, and once you start using a lot of AIs and RPAs and all that, the onus is again on us to check again the consistency of the data which is going in and coming out. So that is going to be a major challenge for us, and we cannot keep excluding that from the scope of our audit, irrespective. And in fact, we used to think earlier that it's only the bigger organizations who go for all these technologies, but we see that a lot of startups and MSMEs are the early adopters of these technologies. And a large portion of us, we are servicing a lot of startups and MSMEs. So we need to upgrade our skills in this, especially in understanding what is the risk, what is the possibility that they have not considered this risk factor or this data which is going wrong. So that data analytics, I always think is basically two aspects. One is the links in the data and what it really can speak for us. The other is the tool. The tool, okay, a lot of technical people are good at, but the other aspect of understanding the data linkages and interpretation of the data is where we can really help out. So this is my personal experience, and we have, as you very well know, advisory. Most of the firms who have specific huge advisory presence, they typically also form another entity so that all the advisory functions can be routed through that, so that there is no conflict with the test function. And there, if you're forming it as an LLP or a partnership, then these people are made partners and co-owners, and they can also sign their respective reports. So that way we are actually currently straddling both. And this is the way of the future. We can't remain restricted to a very core financial area. It's going to be difficult unless we start looking at hardcore finance rather than accounting. We have to then merge into finance also. And there are certain restrictions and ethical limitations that we have as a Chartered Accountant Institute for that also. So any questions specifically you have, or any experiences you would like to share, I would really like to hear that. Yeah, very feebly.
I have two questions. First one, in an MDP, you said a practicing company secretary can also be a partner. So in such a case, if we are doing the audit of the company, can the CS sign off
on the secretarial audit part? Yeah. Currently, there is no literature on this. Okay, so even the guideline is totally silent on these kinds of conflicting areas. But general prudence, when I have discussed with professionals, is that it's better that they don't do, because again, as for cargo purposes and for other legal and regulatory aspects that we have to look into. For finding out contingent liabilities or other compliances and taking a stand on the risk that the company is facing, we tend to rely on that report. So it's always better that it is from an independent person rather than a person associated with us. And same goes for cost audit also.
What is the working having a multidisciplinary partner?
Yeah, the idea, I think it was more envisaged as a way to integrate related professionals and bring a holistic organization. But practically, see, probably that was the thought process behind the whole concept. Because ultimately, if you see, we feed off each other in a lot of aspects. There are a lot of interlinkages in the way we do the audit, and again, there is a lot of interlinkages when we service the client. The idea is that to have a one-stop shop for the client to come and service you. But because we have certain limitations in our practice codes across the institutes, we are not able to effectively use this at all. But I heard that this is very common abroad, especially in UK, Australia, and US and all that. This is very common because they don't have this kind of a stringent ethics code where you can't do this, you can't do that. So it's much more broader, where they can also become partners. So non-practicing people are also partners.
Yeah, my second question was, do you foresee MDPs being a problem with empanelments? Because today morning we just filled up a form where the requirement was all partners in the firm should be...
Yes, it is true. Currently, empanelment, we are having issues because it's only a whole, only if all partners are chartered accountants, is a lot of empanelments even considering us. So that is something, if CA Institute wants to officially make this MDP a working proposition, then there is a lot of work that the Institute will have to do in talking to various organizations to broaden up the empanelment requirements also. So this is still a work in progress in terms of I mean, like you said, what is the purpose? The purpose was something different. The idea is something very implementable, but currently the enabling environment has not happened at all. In terms of regulations across the professional bodies as well as across people who are expecting our services. So it's a long process. It requires a lot of work to be done if it needs to be done that way. Again, the question is, why do I need to do it? That's your question, no, sir. Why cannot I go with the current mechanism? It's working quite well for all of us. Yeah, that's true, except that you want to say that it's a one-stop shop. But again, there are restrictions on who can sign and who cannot sign and all that. So there are still, if you see any of the forensic departments in any of the big fours, they have all these people. They have any team that goes to, they have people on board who are chartered accountants, and then who are forensic, digital forensics guys, then who are, some of the work is a little outsourced, but typically they'll have at least one guy who does all this background work with the security experience, and then they have one guy who is a chartered, one or two people who are chartered accountants, and one or two are digital forensics or technical guys, or a cyber security professional or whatever. But again, they're not partners. Again, partners is only chartered accountants right now. So only chartered accountants sign. So that is also the reason why we do so many, Institute itself has floated so many certificate courses where we can, increase our proficiency and skill level there. So that's it. Anything else you have to ask? I know it is a 3-hour session, but unless we have something very insightful or any other experience that we can share.
Recently we got chartered accountants, scopes of chartered. MDP, who we got?
They are supposed to be, actually you can say that, in fact there is, if you go through the guideline, there is an example. It says so and so and so, firm of, you have to list it down below as a multidisciplinary chartered accountant firm.
Conflict will come, being advocate, engineer, how you are...
That is something we'll have to manage, sir. Because, that's consciously you'll have to say that, okay, even now this is happening. Like for example, in our firm, we have the list of, we do internal audit, we do cost audits, and then we also do statutory audits. So how we manage the conflict is basically all the stat audit clients are anyway listed and circulated and everybody knows, all the partners knows. And anyway, you also have this independence declaration which has to be done. So that way everybody knows what are the list of all your statutory audit clients. And apart from that, whenever we get a query or an inquiry and all that, we normally check with the assurance practice, stat audit practice, whether they have this client, they are servicing this client or any of their subsidiary, whether it would conflict with the independence regulations and all that, and only then we take up the audit or whatever is the prescribed work which is they have asked for. So that is something we'll have to manage internally. It's only that as a single phase you want to say that I am able to give you this, because increasingly what has happened is clients also, I think there is a sort of a fatigue which is setting up in especially the bigger clients where they're handling too many vendors and too many consultants. So there is a fatigue of managing the third party service providers is becoming a huge challenge for them. So some of the corporates, so what they think is, okay, it will be better if I go to one set of people who can give me a cross section of services, not necessarily everything, but at least 3 or 4 essential services. I go to one person so that management of the vendor is easy for them. So that is their perspective. So if we have to, take advantage of that, maybe this is a very good, way we can structure ourselves so that we cater to that. We don't miss out on that opportunity. And typically, the ticket size, in terms of engagement size, is also much bigger in this case for us. So helps us grow in volume and value. Sir.
Why don't we think of a slight variant that not necessarily being positioned as a partner? There can be a multidisciplinary firm where they are put in a place where they can, instead of having as partners, the other discipline people can be appointed in the firm. Ultimately, the client wants a one-shop delivery for his entire requirement. So it need not necessarily be a partner. That other disciplines can be also in the firm, not necessarily a partner.
That is happening anyway, sir. Today, that's how we are largely operating. It's not that everybody. So there are 2 models. If you see the current practice, the way it is being done, 2 models we are adopting. One is where all the partners are chartered accountants. Anyway, in both cases, the partners are chartered accountants only. The firm, basic firm has. Only thing is when we employ the other professionals, they are basically treated as an employee. And the maximum is probably you can give them a title like director or something, but they are not effectively partners. So that is one model. The other model is I put in place a total different consultancy entity itself and onboard all of these people as whatever. If it is depending on the constitution, you call them either as a partner, director, whatever you want, the title that you want to give. So this is currently the model which we are doing, and that way we are able to front end there. But only thing is sometimes when they ask for signing off from your firm itself, that is where which currently doesn't happen much, but I'm possibly envisaging probably 5 years down the line they may ask that, like for example cost audit. And so why is it that your firm itself can't have a partner can sign off on a cost audit report? Because currently as per regulations only a practicing cost accountant can sign the cost audit report, though we may actually do the working. Right. So what we have also done in our firm is we have engaged cost auditors. So we do the entire work, they come review our work and issue the report in their name. But some of the entities or corporations are not very open to that idea. They say, I'm comfortable with you as a brand or I'm comfortable with you as a firm. So I would like your person to, in fact sign off on the reports rather than a different person. If it does come to that, that is where this advantage of having them onboarded as a partner would come in. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay, if there is nothing else to discuss, I think we can call it a day. Thank you for your time and efforts here. Thank you. And I don't know if I've disappointed any of you, so do let me know. I would really love some feedback or expectations. It's not too late even now. So, thank you.